Okay, so for today, we will be discussing typology of crime. The first half of the typology of crime. Okay, so dito muna tayo. Learning content. So typology, from the root word type, okay, is a classification system or scheme that attempts to simplify information by identifying homogeneous or similar groups of cases or attributes and combining them to make a smaller number of categories. In short, inarrange mo lang sila sa magkakauri. Ang iba't ibang bagay kapag inarrange mo sa magkakauri, you may refer to this as the typology. A systematic grouping of entities that have characteristics or traits in common to classes of a particular system. Yung nga, yung mga may pare-parehas na katangian, igugrupo mo sila. An abstract category or class consisting of characteristics organized around a common principle relevant to a particular analysis. A criminal typology is a criminological theory made manageable in a way that can be practically applied to organize, classify, and make sense of a range of behaviors that violate the law. If you can remember, doon sa first lesson natin, actually na-discuss na rin natin to eh. Meron tayong classifications, criminological classification of crimes, and then meron din tayong legal classification of crimes. So, yun na yun. Yung isa pertains to crimes as defined by the law. Yun yung legal classification. And then yung criminological classification pertains to how or to the criminal behavior, how the crime was committed. Okay. So the goal of a typology is to come up with a simpler classification that is based on the principles of homogeneity within categories and heterogeneity across categories. But when we say homogeneity, homogeneous, homo means one. Ibig sabihin may isang katangian lang sila na meron silang lahat. Kumbaga, pare-pare sila ng katangian. And then heterogeneity, heterogeneous. This means many or different, magkakaiba. So, you can easily compare the these things, yung kung ano yung kinategorize mo. So, yeah, you will be able to do it easier. Okay? The purpose of typology of crime are the following. So first, criminal typologies are necessary to understand, identify, and respond to crime. The criminal justice system cannot respond to crime with a one-size-fits-all approach. I think nabanggit ko na rin to before na ang punishment ay hindi pwede na pare-parehas sa lahat ng mga offenders. A punishment should be specific. Hindi pwede na lahat ng nagnakaw, basta lahat ng pag-uri ng pagnanakaw, kulong yan ng 10 years. Paano kung nagnakaw lang ng sardinas? Kumpara sa nagnakaw ng 10 milyong piso. Di ba? Magkaiba sila. So, hindi pwede na pare-parehas ang ipapataw na parusa. Walang one size fits all. Sanctions, management strategies, treatment approaches, and public safety policies and practices are highly dependent on differentiation of types of crimes and criminals. So depende sa kung ano ang strategy na ginagawa ng mga nag-i-implement ng batas o ng mga policies. Depende sa kung ano yung practice sa isang lugar, kung ano ang magiging type of crimes and criminals. And then another purpose of typology of crime is the question, what type of person are we dealing with, is of central importance at every stage in the criminal justice process. So ano yung types? So we have number one, legalistic. So these are classifications based on law or legal sources. For instance, some criminologists classify offenses according to the nature of law violated. In the Philippines, crime may be classified as crimes against persons, crimes committed by public officers, crimes against the law of nations, etc. Na kung saan, ito yung mga nasa revised penal code natin. Legalistic nga di tungkol yun sa batas, di ba? So, doon sa revised penal code, naka-grupo na sila, naka-categorize na sila ng maayos. Crimes against persons, crimes against property, yung mga nabanggit dyan, crimes against the law of nation, crimes against national security, crimes against public interest, and so on. Yan. Then number 2 is sociological. The sociological classification of offenders is based on the social setup where they came from. This classification is anchored on the belief that different social settings produce different offenders. Siyempre, di ba? Iba ang uri ng mga kriminal sa isang city at iba rin ang uri ng mga kriminal sa isang rural na lugar. Kung sa rural, baka nakawan lang ng tsinelas, nakawan ng manok ang mga offenses doon. Samantalang sa syudad, ito siguro mga pickpocketing, snatch, robbery, yung mga ganun. Okay? Then another type is psychological. Mental traits or mental disorders can be a classifying point for offenders. DSM-5 classifies different abnormal behaviors, while other criminologists classify offenders' crime based on their psychological motives. Nagkaroon na rin tayo ng background sa DSM-5, di ba? Ayun, sa mga past lesson natin. And then number 4 is biological. So biological classifications of offenders trace back from the time of Cesar Lombroso, to which he classified criminals according to their physical traits and defects, which he claims to be hereditary. Ang pagiging kriminal daw ay namamana. So kaya ka naging kriminal kasi yung magulang mo o kaya yung mga ninuno mo kriminal sila at naipasa nila sa iyo yung gene ng pagiging kriminal. Ganun daw yun. Na evidence sa physical traits, ito yung tinutukoy natin dati na kapag pangit ka, kriminal ka. Kaya delikado yung iba sa inyo. Ayun. Pero legit yun na binabase sa physical traits kung ikaw daw ay kriminal o hindi. May ganyang mga theories. Okay. So purposes of the typology of crime. So number 1, typology helps criminal justice practitioners decide the proper sanction or penalty to be imposed upon an offender in consideration of his personal and social typology. Criminal law provides exceptions to certain types of offenders. Mas makapagbibigay ng desisyon na tama. Kumbaga, mas malaki yung chance na tama yung maipapataw na penalty or punishment sa'yo kapag nakasaayos yung mga crimes natin into typologies. The number 2, typology can be used in managing the needs of criminal offenders in prison and the process of accepting them in facilities. This can also provide consideration of security measures imposed upon them based on their classification. Sa prison kasi, hindi ka naman basta isasalpak lang sa selda. Ika-classify ka muna nila. Although may separate subject kayo dito, no? Anuhan lang natin ng konti. Pag ikaw ay nasa Bilibid, New Bilibid prison, ika-classify ka. Merong automatic na classification, and then as you go on doon sa kumbaga parang orientation doon, mas maka-classify ka pa kung doon ka ba sa maximum security o doon ka lang sa medium security o sa minimum security. Pero matik pagdating mo nasa medium ka. tas tsaka ka lang maa-assess nun. So, ganun din. Ito yung tinutukoy dito. Mas madali daw ma-manage yung needs ng criminal offenders. Eh, kung ikaw ay ah, dadalhin na sa kulungan o ikukulong na, kailangan malaman kung may mga sakit ka bang nakakahawa. Hindi ka pwedeng isama doon sa general population. Hindi naghasik ka pa ng lagim doon, di ba? Nagkasakit pa kayong lahat doon. Ayun, sinesegregate, lalo nga yung mga may sakit. Okay. Then we have scientific typologies. So classifying events or people into types is a necessary function of science, theory, development, and professional practice. I remember nung elementary, favorite ko yung subject na zoology. Naka-classify doon kung ano ba yung mga cold-blooded animals, ano ba yung mga warm-blooded animals, yan, yung mga mammals, yung mga reptiles, amphibians, mga aves, mga ganun. Yung classification sa animal kingdom. Yun. Kaya mahalaga na kina-classify sila in order for you to ito, to develop theories and for your professional practice. Then some typologies are rooted in stereotypes, not science. So scientific typologies originated with the Linnean classification of plants. And in the social sciences, individuals are grouped into types based on shared characteristics. So ginugrupo ang tao base sa kung ano yung mga katangian na meron ang marami. So for example, ito. Yung madali na lang. For example, yung mga mababait, tsaka yung mga pasaway. Yun. Ginrupo natin sila. Itong sa section na to, mababait. Itong sa section na to, mga pasaway. Galon. Okay? Construction of typologies. Typologies are constructed in two general ways. Ideal types and empirical types. Ideal types are inductively constructed based on a subjective clinical impression. Pag sinabi natin subjective, this is your personal opinion. So armchair theorizing. And then we have empirical types are deductively constructed, describing patterns that exist in the real world through multivariate statistical methods. So you conduct researches and you analyze them through statistical methods. Kapag nag-research na kayo, mas magigets nyo kung anong ibig sabihin dito sa mga multivariate statistical methods na yan. Okay. Other purposes, parang mali. Dito yon, katuloy nito ha. Ano yung presentation ko? Eto. So the method of rehabilitation can be best understood and implemented based on the current typology of offenders. Typology can make criminologists better understand the motives of offenders and provide more appropriate treatment for them. So, ayan, mga bumabaril na naman dito sa criminal. Wala ako. Wala ako. Ayun, criminologist, ang definition niya, ang trabaho niya is to study criminals, crimes, criminals, and criminal behavior. That's the definition of criminology. So, ang criminologist, yung gumagawa nun. Yung criminologist ang nagsa-study ng krimen, ng criminal behavior. Okay. Kaya, mahalaga na nakakategorize sila or merong typology yung crimes para mas makapagbigay ng tamang treatment doon sa mga offenders natin or doon sa mga criminals. Because, again, balikan natin sinabi natin kanina, walang one size fits all na treatment. And, bakit ganun? Katuloy nito, isip ko na nga. Ayan, part ng types of ay multi-trait. So this is a classification based on more than one aspect of an offender's characteristics, such may include his mental, physical, social, and other traits. Kumbaga, madami ng involved doon sa pag-categorize mo or sa paggawa mo ng typology. So that's multi-trait. Okay, 4 elements of crime typologies. So number 1, we have criminal behavior. Number 2 is offender attributes. When you say offender attributes, kung ano yung mga katangian nung mismong gumawa nung krimen. And then 3 is victim characteristics. Meron tayong victim profiling na ginagawa. Tinitignan mo kung ano ba yung tipo nung kriminal na gawing biktima. And then number 4 is situational context. So this classification varies depending on the nature of the act, person, or context. The criminal behavior typology classifies criminals based on the criminal behavior they manifest. Often, this classification looks into the mental state and behavior of the offender during the commission of the crime. Offender attributes classify criminals based on their personal characteristics such as appearance, defects in the body, education, status in the community, and other attributes that can cause variation among a group of offenders. So yun, yung offender attributes, tinitignan kung yung grupo sila, yung mga matatangkad, yung mga pandak, yung mga may depekto sa katawan. Ito yung mga nakatapos ng college, ito yung mga may masteral, ito yung mga wala namang napag-aralan o mababa lang ang napag-aralan. So the classification may also be as far as to look at the victims and their characteristics. Yun na nga yung victim profiling. In victim characteristics, the victim's personal actions are considered his precipitating act, which may have provoked the offender. Baka naman yung mga biktima, ito yung mga mapang-asar, ito yung mga pasmado yung bunganga, kaya sila na biktima. Their lifestyle, personal conditions, and status are the basis of classification. Criminals may also be classified based on the situational context, the structure of society where they belong, the crime they have committed induced by a particular situation, the social forces to which may affect the commission of a crime are considered in this typology. Okay, so the historical roots of criminal typologies. In 1876, Cesar Lombroso, a medical doctor in Italy and founder of the positive school of criminology or the positivist theory, wrote the first treatise on the biological and typological theory of the criminal. So, biological, take note of that. Yun yung kanyang study, yun yung kanyang treatise. Ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na kapag pangit ka, kasi based sa physical characteristics, ang pag-define natin sa isang tao kung criminal ba siya o hindi. So based on anthropometric measurements, Dr. Lombroso identified 5 types of offenders: the born criminal, the epileptic criminal, the criminal of irresistible passion, the insane or feeble-minded criminal, and the occasional criminal, and the persistent and non-abnormal type of criminal. So yan yung mga types of criminals according to Dr. Cesar Lombroso. Dr. Cesar Lombroso is the father of modern criminology. Kaya modern criminology kasi gumamit siya ng scientific method in studying crimes and criminals. Lombroso was the first to develop a classificatory typology, but he did realize the many limitations of primitive typology in determining causation and motivation of the offenders. By today's empirically based standards, Lombroso's early typology was very primitive. Dr. Enrico Ferri, a former student of Lombroso, built on and expanded his mentor's typology in the early 1900s. Ferri explained the fifth and sixth subtype and added a seventh type. Okay. So, si Ferri ay estudyante ni Lombroso at in-expand niya yung gawa ng prof niya. Sabi niya, the occasional offender seemed to be the largest group and a product of growing up with a family of lawbreakers and crime-infested neighborhoods. The persistent criminal was redefined as the habitual criminal who lacks education, grows up in poverty, has deviant companions, and is a product of his environment. So yung persistent criminal talagang hindi lang naging maganda yung lugar kung saan siya lumaki o kung papaano siya pinalaki. Ayun. Kaya siya naging kriminal. And then the seventh subtype identified by Ferry was the involuntary criminal who causes damage as a result of poor foresight, negligence, or disobedience rather than through evil intent or malice. Ito yung mga hindi naman talaga pinlano gumawa ng krimen. Yun na nga, yung mga negligent, mga nakasagasa, aksidente. Sabi nga, walang evil intent or walang malice. Obviously, in terms of the conceptualization and testing of offender typologies based on psychological, psychiatric, sociological, and biological factors, we have come a long way in the past 100 years. The articles in this special issue document the important recent progress that has been made in the development of empirically based offender classification systems and typologies. So who then Sparks observed over 37 years ago a good typology should separate offenders or kinds of behavior into types which have different theoretical explanations appropriate to them. However, a typology developed for determining the differential risk of a particular behavior may not be helpful at all in classifying offenders for either different types of treatment or different levels of control in institutional and or community settings. It is our view that until we reach a clear consensus on the purpose of classification, the offender-based typologies highlighted in this special issue, itong dinidiscuss natin, will be of limited use to criminal justice decision makers. May sigaw silang firing dito. For the simple reason that different purposes require different typologies. Yun na nga. Dahil magkakaiba ang dahilan kung bakit gumagawa ng krimen ang isang tao. Iba-iba ang kanilang motives. Iba-iba ang kanilang yun nga, intentions. So, magkakaibang typologies talaga ang kailangan mabuo natin. So, for example, classification by risk level, treatment options, or control.